Hello, everybody, and welcome to Philosophy Now, your daily hit of philosophy. My name is Wes Speak, and welcome to today's podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about suicide, depression, and mental illness. This is a very taboo topic that is not really brought up much. Nowadays, it is being brought up a little bit more simply due to the death of Robin Williams. He's a comedian and actor, for those of you who don't know. He starred in many movies, and what ended up happening is he was suffering from major depression and ended up taking his own life. The reason I want to make this is because the media itself has really been foreshadowed mainly about his death, and they haven't really been getting to the big issue, which is depression in the United States and Canada, and how much it is affecting people and causing people to take their own lives. So that's what we're going to get into today as well. In the second half of this, I'm going to talk about my own personal experiences with this and and tell you my story about going through the Canadian mental health system, which was a nightmare, and as well as about the relationships with where your brain goes to when you're wanting to commit suicide, and talk about how that affects people around you. Just a few months ago, I had a very serious experience with that, which I will get into in a little bit. So to begin, let's just talk about some facts here. So the Canadian Mental Health Association is what I'm citing right now. 20% of Canadians will personally experience a mental illness in their lifetime. This isn't just with depression, but this is suicide or anxiety, schizophrenia, of course, depression, things of that nature. It is really hard to find specific statistics on depression if you're looking for the total population. It's not just age groups. So for youth in Canada, approximately 10 to 20% of Canadian youth are affected by mental illness or disorder. This is where it gets a little staggering, though. The total number of 12 to 19-year-olds in Canada at risk for developing depression is a staggering 3.2 million. Canada has a population of 34.88 million. So that does equate to a large chunk of that. As well, this is another shocking statistic, is in Canada, only 1 out of 5 children who need mental health services receive them. Again, there are reasons behind this, which I'll get into based on my own personal experiences here. And as well, suicide is among the leading causes of death in 15 to 24-year-old Canadians, second only to accidents. 4,000 people die prematurely each year by suicide. And now we're quoting the CDC here, but an estimated 1 in 10 U.S. adults reports depression. I have been doing a bit of searching, but I cannot find the specific statistics on how many adults everywhere suffer from it. But rough estimates indicate that approximately 235,067 adults in 45 states, the District of D.C., Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, 9.1% met the criteria for current depression. This is quoting the CDC. Of course, there'll be links to this. You guys can go check it out if you're watching this on YouTube. And now we're quoting the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, sorry. So what it says here is that in 2011, the most recent year for which data is available, 39,518 suicides were reported, making suicide the 10th leading cause of death among Americans. What this equates to is, in that year, someone in the country died by suicide every 13.3 minutes. More than likely now, though, that rate, I would say, almost has, I'd say, doubled. Just to be fair, again, this is just based on what I have seen, but there is tons of people suffering from depression, and the amount of suicides every day. I mean, if you look in, for instance, your local newspaper, for instance, and you go look at the obituaries, and if there is such things as a suicide being kind of publicized, you will find it. And I mean, even if you just search all over the internet, there's at least one person dying per day in, for instance, Canada and the US from depression and induced suicide. And now we're going to be looking at the suicide statistics from Statistics Canada. So in 2011, 3,728 people committed suicide. If you look at the rates, it has been slightly declining. In 2007, it was 3,611. 2008, 307.05. 2009, 3,890. 2010, 3,951. So it has declined a little bit from 2010 and 2009, but that is still quite high. So now I'm going to get into my own personal kind of talk about this. Alright, so now we're going to get into the second half of this podcast, which is talking about my own experience with the mental health system. So to begin, I am an 18-year-old. I'm less so affected by depression itself nowadays, but I mean, over the past few months, there was a lot of times that it got severe, which I'll get into. So starting back in approximately when I was in grade 9, I'm currently graduated, so if that gives you a bit of a timeline, I was going through extreme depression. I wasn't suicidal, I was just I had a ton of anxiety, ton of just being depressed. And anyways, I stopped going to school for it. I missed approximately 99 days of school in my grade 9 year. I had gone for about 30 days out of the whole year, which is kind of crazy to think about. So with depression itself, like for me, it was the anxiety that was killing me. So what happened was I went to my doctor, I talked to him about it, and I got referred into the mental health system in Calgary, Alberta, through the Alberta Mental Health. And anyways, what ended up happening was you get placed on a wait list. So from there, they rank your case of what is most serious, how bad it is. And anyways, it takes about 6 months until you actually go and are able to get into seeing someone. So for me, taking it from my perspective here, I'm assuming it's only more time in the US, but seeing someone, for instance, to waiting 6 months to be able to talk to somebody is crazy. And especially for me too, I didn't want to get on drugs. My mom, she was on antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication, sleep aids, things of that nature, and it really fries your brain, to say the least. It kills your brain, so I didn't want to be on any of that. And anyways, what ended up happening was, with me, by the time I got in there, it was just downhill. I stopped going to school, even more so, and it really was just ruining me. And that's the thing, though, is the government specifically, both Canada and US at fault for this, but they act like mental health, and even the general population act like you can access mental health services so easy, but in reality there's waiting lists, there's things of that nature, and it's not as simple as you go in and say, hey, I need to make a counselor appointment or a psychologist appointment to talk to somebody because I'm feeling really depressed, and I know this isn't normal. You get put on a waiting list, and from there they rank your case too. So let's say mine was pretty severe because I was missing school and such. But for instance, let's just say you had, you were very depressed, you were still living your life, though, they would make it so it was at least a year, which is crazy to think about how we can take somebody and, suicide itself is so taboo and is kind of treated like it's such a bad thing, when in reality we can't really do anything about it. When no one's willing to help you, where are you supposed to go? Then that's when you lead to the relationships with other people, which I'm going to lead into. So in this year, grade 12, I'd been suffering from depression from the time I was in grade 9. I kind of dealt with it. And really, the mental health system, the one thing that stood in my mind was the counselor I was going to, the psychologist actually, she said to me, all of this stuff is your fault. And that really stuck with me. And to say the least, that doesn't help when somebody's depressed, saying it's all your fault that you're depressed. It's all your fault that you have anxiety. When in reality, the majority of depression is caused by chemical imbalances. And in my grade 12 year, the thing is, I took a psychology class. So this is for half the year. Took a psychology class, and we talked about how psychologists are, and that the one thing they're never supposed to do is blame the actual person who's going through something, because that can just completely set them off. And that's the thing for me, is when she blamed me, it ruined me with going to counselors or trusting people like that. So from there, moving on, I wouldn't go try to talk to anyone. I would pretend that, oh, there's nothing wrong, when in reality I was living every day a lie, being affected by it every single day. And what ended up happening was, in my grade 12 year, I was with this girl. I met her in grade 10. So we were together from grade 10 up until June of this year, June 2014. And what ended up happening is one day, throughout our whole relationship anyways, I was always battling with depression, and there was quite a few times where she would stop me from killing myself. I was, self-harming quite a bit. I'd say almost on the daily it was at some points, and it was getting pretty severe for me. And anyways, then at one point, finally in June, I planned on ending it all. I went, and to say the least, I went through with it partially. What happened was, I don't want to get too graphic into this, but I was dangling, per se, until the point where I lost feeling in my limbs. And it's such a weird feeling when you get to that point, because it's weird to see my brain is here, and this is normal what I'm doing, And then from there, I stopped because it scared me, and I don't know what it was. For me, I'm slightly religious, so I say that it was a divine intervention, but I ended up taking off the thing, climbing back up on the stool, and just sitting there, and I called her and told her what I tried to do, not thinking that, because she had been there for me all the other times, and then boom, just says, no, I'm leaving you. Then she would threaten me with trying to tell people about it. And that's the thing, is you're threatened by that, because it's not so much as, if you want to kill yourself, you can't go to a doctor and say, hey, I'm wanting to kill myself. They're going to say, oh, okay, well, just wait here a minute, Billy. And then they go and call up the psychiatric ward, and you get taken there. And I know this from experience, not specifically for me, because I've never had that happen, because of course I was keeping it in and keeping it between me and my girlfriend. For the 3 years, my family had no idea about it. I was living basically almost two lives, it felt like, which was kind of with the Robin Williams situation. What it seems like from the outside is that there was the Robin Williams we saw on TV and on movies, and then there was the other Robin Williams where he was affected by it and wouldn't take off that mask, per se, unless he was alone, or if there was somebody he was venting to, But that's the thing, is when you want to kill yourself, when somebody tells you, oh, we're going to take away all your rights and lock you up because you're mentally unfit for society, that is one of the scariest things ever. And that's what scared me, is because what the hell are you supposed to do when somebody's taking you against your will? It is frightening. And I feel that if there was a better system set up, people wouldn't be scared of that. And then they could come out with, hey, yeah, I want to kill myself. What am I supposed to do, doctor? Not, hey, stay here while I go call up the mental health ward so they get someone down here to take you there. And again, I'm basing this off of personal experience with some close family members. Don't want to specifically state who, but someone who was very depressed and ended up going to the hospital quite a few times in a period of a month because she wanted to, and she would tell somebody, and boom, that's the thing, is people's instant response when you tell them, hey, I want to kill myself, is, okay, you need some help. There's nothing I can do for you. You need help. When a lot of the time what someone needs is just someone to talk to. I mean, with my personal experience, there was countless times where all I wanted was just somebody to be able to talk to me about it and say, yeah, you know what, you're going through some stuff, but I'm here for you. It's going to be okay. Things of that nature. But I don't feel that in any way restricting someone's rights is going to help you. That's going to scare people. And I know for me, if I'm scared of going and approaching someone and telling them how I feel, mentally, I can almost guarantee you there's other people out there who feel the same way. So really what I'm trying to get at is there is such a big stigma out there about mental health that you can't go to somebody about it. Yet the media acts like, well, if somebody just reached out, well, you can't reach out because there is no one there. That's the thing. In many cases, there is no one there. It is either A, you're ending up in a hospital, locked away with people who don't give a shit about you, or you're going through a mental health system, which takes a long time, which many people don't have. Now I'd like to talk about when your brain gets into that state, because this is something that I feel is important for people outside of that to know. Is it's almost like, I'd like to make the analogy of you move into a new house. Okay, so at first you move into that new house, that's when the depression onsets. Everything is weird at first, you're getting used to it, you're getting used to the new house. It feels weird, it doesn't feel right, it doesn't, you can tell there's something off. But then eventually you get used to it, and you begin to get okay with it. You begin to get comfortable with it after, a couple months to a year. You're okay with that, just like with depression and that thought of suicide. You start to get okay with it. And then eventually, let's pretend that house, you stayed in there and you're just alone, and you stayed in there for, let's say, 3 years, like I did with depression. I kept that in. For 3 years, you're just dealing with that inside that house, and then eventually you're going to want out of that house. But when you try to get out of that, it's frightening. And that's kind of how it feels when you're depressed and you try to reach out. And the metaphor here would be you're trying to get out of that house, like with depression, where you're trying to approach the mental health people and get help. It's scary because you've learned to live with that and accept that, and that's kind of what feels right and what you're living with. And it's not so much that when you're living with that you can tell you're unhappy, it's you get used to it. It becomes the norm. For instance, another metaphor here, I like explaining things with metaphors, is if you live in, let's say, a war-torn country like Gaza. If you live there, you're going to be getting used to all that fighting, all the war, the booms from explosions going off eventually. And that's kind of with depression, how you get used to it. But eventually you hit a certain point where you're going to want out by any means, let's say that house. And with depression, you're going to want out. But there was that easy way out with the hard way out per se, with the door. And, approaching someone else to help you. But when that's not there, the only other way out is suicide. And basically what happens is when you're in that state, it's really the only thing keeping you calm. I know that's a weird analogy, but it's the only thing keeping you okay, is that thought, like, oh, okay, you know what, no matter how bad this stuff gets today, there's always going to be that option in case I have to. Which for a lot of people, ends up sometimes becoming, okay, well, you know what, now I can't stop thinking about it. I'm obsessed with this point and I need to do it. And many people, for me especially, it's weird. It's like you wake up in the morning one day and, you've always been wanting to, but you never would take the jump, the leap, to say the least. And then you just wake up one morning and boom, you know what, I'm gonna have to do it. There's no other way. I'm gonna have to do it. That's basically what it's like, is you just wake up and you plan on doing it. You get that note written, you figure out your way, or sometimes it takes a day, you figure it out the day before. Like for me, what it was is that night before, I was up all night, boom, decided to, and then in the morning did my usual stuff and then went to do it. And I tried multiple times. At first it was just kind of getting used to the feeling, and then eventually it was taking the leap of faith, per se. To say the least now, for those of you who are wondering, I am a lot better with that now. I would say I'm still somewhat depressed, but I have, after my girlfriend at the time left, it was a real blow that people leave because of mental illness, that people don't want to deal with that. And it was weird, you know. So I started trying to do self-help stuff. I started seeing a counselor, that kind of thing. But even with counselors, you can't bring out everything, because you can't say, hey, I want to commit suicide, because then again it's leading back to the whole you're going to get locked up in a mental health ward thing. So for me, what basically helped was actually exercise, and it got my mind off of a lot of stuff. And I mean, if you're out there experiencing, and I'm just generalizing here, but if you are, you know, try working out. I know for me, it did help. I felt a lot better about stuff. It gave me something to do to keep my mind off of it. And I mean, there is times where I feel like shit, and I feel like, you know what, I have to do it. I want to do it again. But then again, the new girl I'm with, her and I have been best friends for around 4 years now. And when the previous girl I was with was kind of leading out, starting in Easter, we started losing being close to each other. She kind of picked up the pieces, and this girl I know won't leave based on that, because she's kind of had her own experience with it. And I mean, that's really the thing, is you need to find somebody in your life who you can trust and talk to about something like that you're going through. And I mean, really, if anyone from, like, hypothetically, let's say the government or something is listening to this, or even citizens here, and you want to make a change, the one thing is the mental health system isn't right. It's not set up to help people. It's set up to be financially it's basically set up so that it can have financial continuation and not be a loss to the government. It's not set up to help people as much as it possibly could, because there's not enough psychologists in there. There's too long wait times, and really, people aren't getting the help they need because they're scared and living in fear. You know, if it wasn't such a taboo thing, we'd be able to talk about it. But that's the thing, is people say, well, why doesn't somebody who wants to kill themselves, why don't they just come out and talk about it? Because you cannot talk about it with somebody. When you try to, I've had that happen multiple times, where I try to talk to one of my parents about it. You know, not multiple times, let's say probably 2 or 3 times back when I was in grade 9. You know, I would try to tell them, hey, this is how I'm feeling, you know, and their instant reaction is, okay, I'm going to call an ambulance for you. You don't do that shit. That doesn't help somebody. Anyways, if you want to chime in on this, comment below. As well, I hope you enjoyed this podcast today. It's a little short. It's actually a little longer than any of our other podcasts that we've done in the past. But hopefully you like this. And as well, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, that kind of thing, go ahead, leave them below. I'll try to respond to everyone. As well, share this video around. I mean, if you know somebody who's suffering from it and want kind of a good way to explain it, if this aided at all in the explaining section kind of thing about what it is like to deal with that, go ahead and just share the video around. And I mean, realistically, if you're to take away anything from this video, it's that if you're not affected by mental health, don't assume you know how it feels. You know, with mental health illness, that is. If you're not affected by it on a personal level, not you know somebody who has it, but if you're not personally affected by it, do not act like you know what's going on with somebody. Everyone is different. Everybody in the world goes through different things. There's some people out there who can be depressed without feeling suicidal. There's some people out there who get depressed and start eating disorders. There's many different things, and people cannot reach out. And that is the issue. So if you are a parent, somebody who's listening to this, and you think a loved one is, be there to talk to them. Don't try to push it off on somebody else, because it doesn't help. No matter how much people say that. It doesn't help. It doesn't help to go and push somebody's mental health illness off to someone else, like a mental health association or a mental health hospital, because you can't deal with it. That doesn't help. It makes it hard for people to trust, and it makes people live in fear and try to hide it even more. So again, if you were to take away anything from this, try to be open with mental health illness, and just be there for somebody who needs it. If somebody comes to you who is suicidal, don't immediately try to push it off onto somebody else. Try to talk to them. If you think they are in serious harm or risk of hurting themselves, then yes, by all means, call somebody. But just because somebody says they're suicidal doesn't mean they're going to do it. Because there is a difference between feeling suicidal and having that will to do it. Because there's many times where somebody can feel like, oh, you know what, yeah, I want to be dead, but I can't go through with it. Because it takes all your being to do it. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Comment, rate, and of course, subscribe.